Well, welcome everyone. My name is Carmen Mezzera. I serve as Executive Director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, or as we typically call it, APSIA. I'm joined by my colleague Stephanie Jackson from the Sam Nunn School of International Affairs at Georgia Tech. And we're delighted to welcome you to our biannual advisor webinar, Helping Students Prepare for a Global Marketplace. As we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in that chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll take any substantive questions at the end. But particularly if you're having technical issues or something doesn't make sense, please let us know, and we will jump in and do our best to help you there. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Stephanie to get us started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carmen. I am glad to be here with all of you to talk about how we can work to help students better prepare for a global workplace. And just a little bit about me before we get started. I've been at Georgia Tech about going on 15 years now here with the Sam Nunn School of International Affairs. I started as an international plan advisor, and the international plan here is a program that is designed to help build international competence within our undergraduate degrees here at Georgia Tech. Currently, my role is Assistant Director for Advising and Professional Development, and I work with undergraduate students, both majors and our minors, as well as our graduate students on their career development. My own educational background is that I have a bachelor's degree in political science. I also have a master's degree in international development studies, and I am back in graduate school currently pursuing a master's degree in instructional design. So it's been a very busy semester here for me. But what I want to do first is find out who is here, get a sense of who is in the audience. So let's see if I can get this started. Can you all see the survey? Can you answer the survey? Yes. Okay. I see some folks voting. Good. Just get a sense who's in our audience today. So academic advisors, there's some career services folks, international education, also academic support. We have a faculty advisor, learning abroad. Okay, that's international education. Okay, experiential learning, career services, very good. Okay, just wanted to get a sense who we might be talking to today. All right, thank you for responding to that. We're gonna close that, go back to our presentation. Okay, let me make sure I have there we go. All right, so talking about our various roles. So whichever units or departments we're in, what are we hearing from the students that we're talking to? In your advising conversations, what topics or interests do students express their passion around? So some of the more common ideas that we talk about, at least in my advising conversations, are their interest in travel, culture, and language. So that's study abroad, that's learning or developing a language proficiency, engaging other cultures and manners of doing business, perhaps even working abroad. Students are also talking about tackling big problems like poverty, environment, and disease. This could be them responding to and solving some societal ills through practical and policy efforts. It could be also politics and government. They may be interested in representing different constituencies or representing government, or diplomacy, intelligence, or local, state, and federal opportunities. Let's see, does this start? My little movie didn't start. So I wanted to share that we had a recent graduate of one of our master's programs. He held an internship with the Office of the President of Poland. And this opportunity came about through a partnership with General Electric for a cohort of about 20 students. And they were from the United States and Poland to participate in a political, economic, and cultural exchange. And he stated that he wanted to do this exchange because he was, quote, a Chinese major in undergrad. And in grad school, he got a bit interested in security issues and European security. And this was to build on a previous experience in Germany to learn about transatlantic security cooperation. So learning about the United States and European Union security policy was the draw for him. Learning about the theories of international relations and why countries do what they do really opened his mind, and it was influential in him being interested in Poland and helped make the case for his participation in that particular exchange. So they think about what they say that they like. Our students talk about debate and argue. So they talk about different competing philosophies, evolving ideologies, philosophical debate, maybe law and constitutional issues. It may be a call to service, helping people, volunteering or teaching abroad, service learning and how this translates into social impact. It could be a desire to see social change, human rights, human trafficking, social justice movements, and forms of social activism. It could be that they are explorers. They're curious with a passion to innovate. They might be driven by a prospect of global opportunity. Another alumna had an example that they shared, and they said that I learned how to identify, analyze, and solve problems, to think critically, analytically, and creatively. This has served me well, especially working on corporate investment banking transactions, as well as forays into internet startups, real estate, and other business ventures. So there are a variety of different interests that our students may come to us with. And so as advisors, we want to guide them in channeling these into potential careers. And regardless of the majors they may have selected, all of these interests can have a global component and be explored in the framework of a global marketplace. So we talk about putting the pieces together. So most students are very surprised at the flexibility that comes with any degree or any major. So for instance, a degree in engineering can lead to a career in finance, while a history degree can lead to a job in the healthcare field. So often I'm asked, what can I do with this major? And we talk with our students about the connection between majors and career choices. There are some straight lines from one major to one particular career, particularly with technical degrees in STEM-related fields. But employers increasingly seek candidates that do not and often use major as a criterion for accepting applications. Often, internships and full-time positions for undergrads are posted and are open to all majors or a diverse range of majors. So that said, on this slide, we're looking at majors, interests, and careers. And here's a variety of positions and jobs in the majors and interests that can lead to those particular careers. What I want to point out are the range of disciplines that are listed here. So there are majors in the humanities, in the social sciences, as well as in sciences and in the engineering fields. Many careers, even down to the local level, can have an international component to them. As an example, one of our alums has a master's degree in international affairs, and she works for the city of Atlanta. It's surely considered a local job. Her role is Deputy Director of the Office of International Affairs, and she is charged with maintaining the city's relationships with the international community, promoting international trade opportunities, and encouraging foreign direct investment, and also just raising the global profile of the city of Atlanta. So while her job is local, it is inherently international with a global impact. And all of these careers and positions that are listed here can be obtained with a degree or training in international relations. A couple of other examples I want to share with you of what we call untraditional paths to internationally oriented careers. You have another alumnus who is currently in public affairs and communications for the government relations offices at Coca-Cola. He obtained this position after a stint as an intern in Coca-Cola's public affairs department. He had previously interned with the Carter Center, but before he started our graduate program, he had earned an undergraduate degree in music education. And he was a music teacher and a program director in an Atlanta area school for about 5 or 6 years. He had also lived abroad in Thailand and had developed some foreign language proficiency, and also served as a volunteer with some non-governmental organizations in Mexico, Uganda, and Botswana. But it was through these experiences that he developed a skill set in management, communication, independent and collaborative work, as well as in intercultural and interpersonal skill development. He says, and I quote, "I use my graduate school experience daily, evaluating business environments, tracking socio-political events, and the impact they have on our business, understanding the various political processes around the world, and understanding how our business has adapted to the varied countries we are all a part of, and the elements of my job where I use the skills and knowledge I gained at the Nunn School." So another example for a student that graduated from our undergraduate program is now pursuing a master's in public policy through the National Science Foundation Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service. This program recruits students that are interested in cybersecurity and working in the public sector. It's an opportunity for liberal arts students that have designs on working for the government to use their capabilities in cybersecurity, as well as fits a need at the moment in the federal government. So this student stated she was super nervous because she didn't have this big passion for computer science. And it took her professor explaining how cybersecurity specifically, and especially international cybersecurity policy, had great implications for many issues she is passionate about, like human trafficking or drug trafficking and terrorism. With cyberspace being one of the biggest domains for security issues, she found that even as a liberal arts student, she can use her technical skill and passion to help truly solve the problem she cares most about. And lastly, she noted that thinking that pursuing something cybersecurity related would pigeonhole her or prevent her from being able to do other things. She stated, and I quote, "But technology is moving forward, and being a part of this technical field has really helped me have more opportunity and has not hindered me, nor my passion for security, travel, and international affairs." So I want to plug an APSIA resource here to share with your students. The career directors at APSIA institutions, along with the APSIA staff, have curated something called the International Career Guide, which can be viewed and downloaded from the APSIA website. And I believe Carmen just posted the link in the chat room. So this career guide breaks down the career options in the global workplace by sector and by subject area. So each section provides a brief description, as well as a sample of employers, tips to gaining employment in that particular sector, and key skill sets and experiences to have to be competitive in that particular field. So I just ask you to take a look at that, check that out on the website, and please share it, make it available to your students as a resource. So thinking about careers, studying a single discipline is not enough anymore. An interdisciplinary, intercultural, multilingual education is becoming necessary to advance in the global workplace. An interdisciplinary field like international affairs prepares students for a variety of career paths. So as you see listed here, there's communications, there's media, public relations, business and consulting, development and conflict resolution, energy and environment, education, human rights, law, science and technology, security, and intelligence, which happen to be some of the more prevalent career paths that use or can accept students with international relations training and background. Historically, it is thought that international relations is equal to government. And quite often, a majority of my students, when they begin our undergraduate program, they really want to work for the State Department or they want to work for the United Nations. But according to research done by APSIA, approximately 42% of the class of 2018, their graduates, their first destinations landed them in the private sector. It is the largest employer of our graduates, then followed by the government or public sector at 33%, and then that followed by the nonprofit or NGO sector at 20%, and multilateral organizations make up less than 5%. So when we think about government institutions, this includes the United States Department of State, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, intelligence agencies, in addition to agriculture, commerce, the Centers for Disease Control, education, energy, transportation, etc. So the interest in government careers should not exclude local or government opportunities or state or national offices, as I gave an example earlier. Government can also mean working for a royal family or a king. There are opportunities to work in other nations as well as with consular offices and embassies of other countries. Nonprofits could include organizations like CARE, Catholic Relief Services, the Gates Foundation, Human Rights Watch, Habitat for Humanity, and other non-governmental organizations and foundations around the world. Some private for-profit companies include Bank of America, Coke, Deloitte, Fleischmann Hillard, GE, as I mentioned earlier, Google, Home Depot, the Walt Disney Company. There are intergovernmental and multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, the United Nations, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Organization of American States, the European Union, NATO, etc. And then other organizations. Students have gone on to start their own companies. Entrepreneurship is certainly growing. There are travel and tourism companies, global health and sanitation programs, global commerce and technology initiatives, and the like. So the world is open to our students, and there are particular skills that are necessary for them to find success in this global workplace. So a lot of conversation about skills, particularly the skill set of younger workers, are being prepared for today's global workplace. The National Association of College and Employers, referred to as NACE, calls this career readiness, or the competencies that prepare college students for a successful transition to the workplace. Anecdotally, I can tell you that employers I talk to emphasize the importance of soft skills as key to hiring and then eventual success or promotion on the job. So that is communication, that is teamwork, that's problem-solving orientation, that's emotional intelligence. These are the key abilities that employers are screening for, and it's imperative that we help our students find ways to develop these skills throughout their college careers. For global careers, I'd like to point out a few that would give them an edge in the workplace. So one of them is professional experience. This can be local, this can be virtual or online, this can be in a national organization or even internationally. But exposure and experience in the world of work to understand what it's like working in a given industry, organization, or a particular job, to be able to demonstrate personal accountability and effective work habits, such as punctuality, working productively with others, and time workload management, and the ability to learn from mistakes. Those are all key experiences for them to gain. Communication skills, excellent written and verbal communication skills, the ability to write in various forms, so be it briefing papers, memos, research papers, reports, white papers, etc. Also to have strong public speaking and presentation abilities. Proficiency in more than one language or an aptitude for learning additional languages. This is tied to having global or intercultural fluency and the ability to value and respect or learn from diverse perspectives. Having strong analytical or quantitative skills, the ability to obtain or interpret and use knowledge, facts, and data for human capital and other business elements. So this also includes the ability to think critically and to problem solve, to use sound reasoning to analyze issues, make decisions, and overcome problems. Technical skills is really about leveraging the existing digital technologies and adaptability to new and emerging technologies ethically and efficiently to solve problems, to complete tasks, and to accomplish goals. So this includes skills in graphic design, social media, data analysis, coding or computer programming, geographic information systems, modeling, etc. Project management includes being able to leverage their strengths and skills to organize, to prioritize, and to delegate. It also entails building collaborative relationships and working within a team structure in the stages of managing a project or a program. So students don't necessarily have to have the PMP certification at the start of their career, but they should be familiar with the initiation and planning and execution, launch, control, track, delivery, and close elements of a program management. And also networking to create their own network, or what I call their own personal advisory board. So have mentors, coaches, and peers that they can bounce ideas with, industry contacts and insiders, sponsors. They want to develop relationship building habits to build a network, which can be key to their career management. These are critical skills and abilities we should be advising our students to learn. So next I want to talk about how they can go about learning some of these skills. So we want to encourage our students to get internships. Having that hands-on experience gained during college is really the most critical hiring variable. The more internship experience that they gain, the better. Of course, we don't want that to interfere with their completing their degrees. However, if they can get 2 or maybe even 3 internships done, that will make them even more competitive for full-time positions. To get published, we want them to showcase excellent communication skills, both verbal and written. So many students run academic undergraduate journals out of their schools, and there are research opportunities with faculty that can lead to being published as well. Some social media outlets may provide opportunities, and what recruiters are really looking for are strong writing skills, and that can also be developed through getting published. So developing a skill in writing concise, clear communications is something that comes with practice. So being published can contribute to that brand. Students can also showcase their knowledge in a particular area of interest that might be of interest to that company. So for example, I have an alumnus from our master's program who developed an interest in fair trade and sustainable investment. So she began to flesh out this interest through papers and assignments in her courses and did considerable research with faculty to get published. She was able to refer back to her portfolio of writing and work in this area during interviews as a Presidential Management Fellows finalist, and was offered a PMF position with the Department of Commerce International Trade Administration. Students can also pursue a minor or a certificate or maybe even double major. So encourage them to take courses outside of their primary major and to develop a concentration. Employers view this additional breadth as a benefit. So if a student is studying an engineering or technical discipline, a minor in business or a foreign language would be attractive for global employers. Or if studying in the liberal arts, a minor in business or communications or digital media would be an attractive specialization. So increasingly, employers are looking for candidates to stand out. So having a specialization is one manner of doing that. To encourage students to study and to travel abroad, to learn a language. There are fellowship programs that will pay or offer funding for international experiences to be able to do study abroad or internships abroad, and they may even pay for graduate school or for professional internship or traineeship experiences with government offices or non-governmental offices, and these provide valuable benefits and bring prestige to one's resume. They should lead something, executive board level, be a president or a director or lead a committee, etc. That's preferred to just having membership in an organization. Extracurricular participation is certainly looked upon favorably. So the evidence of an ability to work well in teams, to manage others, to manage budgets, programs, and time is something we want to see our students do. We want them to find ways to get involved in international or global themed events and organizations both on and off campus. So maybe they can participate in International Education Week, which is held every November. Maybe they can join the local Model UN Club or apply for a traineeship with ISIC or ISDE. Or maybe join a campus club on culture and language or a topic of interest like human rights or sustainability. They can also join professional organizations and take advantage of the student rate or young professional networks. That way they can also network possibly with alumni or talk to professors and make connections. We want them to practice polishing their interpersonal skills. So as advisors, our role is to guide students to make wise choices and to maximize the time in college. So working with undergraduates, there is a timeline to this. Not many are able to secure internships the first year of school, yet they may be able to study abroad or start a new language. So craft a timeline to help them build upon skills and assess career readiness throughout their years of college. As they take coursework, they develop an interest in a particular minor or begin to formulate an interest in a research topic that they can cover throughout different courses. In effect, they're developing an expertise. They can join organizations early on as a member and take on increasing responsibility and use that experience to build connections and network with other leaders and organizations. As they begin to search and then interview for internships, they have experiences they can talk about: leadership, language, research, study abroad, etc. And with additional internships, they become competitive for full-time positions. So our immediate goal is to prepare students for that first job out of school. Yet we also want to equip them with helpful strategies to navigate upward in this increasingly competitive global market. And that could include graduate school as a strategy. Perhaps, if not right after finishing the undergraduate degree, maybe after completing a few years of work. And so with that, I will ask Carmen to talk with you more about, if the decision is made to pursue an international relations degree, how to proceed.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks for all those great tips. I think as you all talk with your students about any kind of graduate program, there's really 5 questions that we encourage students to ask themselves, and you can pose to them as a tool to help them start to discern which program makes the most sense for them in any discipline. We know that students who are maybe thinking about graduate school perhaps need to weigh their options and sift one level down from some of the marketing that they may see or the pressures that they feel to go into one particular field or another. So the 5 questions that we encourage students to ask themselves that you can use, the first one is about what is it that they will study? And that goes far beyond just what the name of a particular degree is. We often find that that doesn't really reflect the academic structure that lies underneath the program. So challenge them to think about what kind of the core courses they have to take in that graduate program. What are the elective courses that they get to take in that particular program? And use that as a comparative model. Ask them how prescriptive they want a graduate program to be, or how much flexibility they need to maybe marry together different interests. We often find that students think they have to study one thing or go into one particular program, but when they see just what's dictated to them or the sorts of things they have to do, it doesn't really reflect the kinds of skills they want to build or the kinds of attributes they're trying to obtain with that particular master's degree. It's also really important to get students to think about their qualifications relative not only to the admissions criteria, but also to that lovely imaginary person that schools often talk about on their websites. No, there's no one number that's going to get a student into or keep a student out of a graduate school necessarily, but it is important that they understand where they're positioned relative to that average candidate, and then think about which schools are a bit of a stretch, which schools really do have them in that average zone, and then which schools they're perhaps more competitive than an average candidate as they try to apply, hopefully, to a range of those schools, or to ones where it's not solely stretch schools or solely schools where they're more competitive. They can really understand their positioning and perhaps their competitiveness once they've evaluated it from that standpoint. We also really encourage students to think about things outside of solely the academic program. If you have students who love being in warm weather places or couldn't imagine living outside of a small town or hate the rat race of a big city, helping them see that if they're going to spend 2 years of their life living in a particular place, they need to be in a living environment that's really going to help them thrive. So if you have a student who doesn't like big cities, doesn't want a fast pace, guiding them away from a New York or a DC or a Tokyo or a London may really be a service to them, even if they falsely presume that they have to be in a place like that in order to succeed in their field. Making sure that they balance the academic with some of those qualitative life factors can be an important bit of advice you share with them, because they really are going to spend at least 2 years of their life in that spot, and they need to have all of that ancillary support to make sure they can get through the rigor of a graduate program. We know for students, particularly of this generation, affordability is a critical question. So making sure they understand not only 1 year's worth of tuition, but the full cost of what it takes to go into a particular program for the length of that program. Many of our schools have 2-year master's degree programs, so it would be for both years, as well as perhaps an internship or some experiential learning in the summer. It's going to be about cost of living. There's quite a difference between living in New York or living in College Station, Texas. So make sure students build in and balance both of those factors as they think about the full range of affordability. Most schools will be able to share a fully loaded cost, as well as some information on cost of living, to help students understand and discern between what they're really taking on when they go and apply to these different schools. And we can talk a little bit more about the many different ways to pay for graduate school, if those are a lot of questions that you get, particularly from students where affordability is even more of a critical component. But the most important question on this list I find is the what's next question. Helping students see how a particular set of skills that's being built in a graduate program, how the whole time of mastering something on the graduate level really has to fit in with some longer term professional goals. It's not that they have to have one specific job or one specific industry in mind, but challenging them to read job descriptions, talk to alumni, talk to faculty, talk to employers who maybe come to campus to see what are those skills and traits, such as the ones that Stephanie mentioned, that are going to help them succeed in that particular field. And then once they start to hear those common themes across the sorts of jobs and sectors that sound really interesting to them, they'll be able to build a measuring stick that they can use to weigh and to evaluate different graduate programs. So if they know that they need 3 or 4 critical skills to be in the fields they want to be in, they can use that and see which skills are going to be built in a particular grad program, which ones aren't, and then hopefully maximize their time in graduate school to tick as many of those boxes and build as many of those skills as they can so they hit the ground running when they finish. Talking with students too about how they can best prepare to apply is critical. Every school is going to be different, and we say this to them all the time, and I'm sure you do too. So it's very important that they follow directions, but challenging them while they're still undergrads to start to think about how they have a competitive resume or CV, and obviously those are 2 different things, but making sure students focus in on which one it is that graduate schools are going to need, or the graduate schools they're interested in are going to need. Making sure they understand they're going to need transcripts from all of the institutions they've attended. So if they were lucky enough to study abroad and directly enrolled in a particular university, they're going to need those transcripts. So challenging them now while they're undergrads to think about that, to pay attention to those kinds of things, and to make sure that they have all of the paperwork in line so that when they need it, they can go back and get the transcripts that they need. Different disciplines are taking different approaches to standardized test scores. More and more of our schools are going GRE optional, but something like the LSAT or the MCAT are fairly pervasive in those disciplines. So making sure your students are thinking now about when it makes sense for them to take those tests. For some students, it's really going to be while they're still in school mode and while that's where their head is at. And in most cases, the scores are good for 5 years. So if you have a student really who needs to be in an academic context to do well on a test like that, challenging them to take it now, even if they don't think they're going to need it for 5 years, can be an important component to make sure they're competitive in several years when they need to pull out those scores. For other students, perhaps who are completely terrified by tests like that, having them think about programs that are GRE optional or disciplines where it's not quite as much of a factor as in others, so that they can really be well positioned to succeed in their application. They're going to need to put together personal statements and in some cases supplemental essays. And I'll talk in a minute about some advice you can give them, whether it's for graduate school or fellowships or many other applications, to really put together a personal statement that tells their distinctive story and doesn't sound like the other truly thousands of applications that a graduate school might read. But it's also a good tip to encourage them to think now about who they're going to need letters of recommendation from. If they have a great relationship with a faculty member, or if there's a particular staff member they've worked for or worked closely with, encouraging them and reminding them to keep that relationship alive after they graduate, after they finish, and make sure that they always circle back to that individual so that if a letter is needed, they still have a warm channel that they can use to request that information. We find that a lot of students have great relationships on campus and then they leave. And 2 or 3 years later, they have to call and remind a faculty member who they are or specify for a staff member what project they worked on because they've let that relationship languish. So getting them thinking now while they're currently in school about keeping those connections going far after they finish is also an important part of their longer term planning. And then for a lot of students too, bank statements for financial aid and having them think about their financial picture as it may relate to future degrees as well as future work. So I talked a little bit about essays and personal statements. And what we encourage students to do is to think about them in 3 parts. We know that personal statements can often trip students up because they try to cram their entire existence and all of their feelings into one essay. And it comes out fairly, in some cases, generic and bland. So we encourage students to think about who they were. What were their life experiences, their work, their volunteer experiences, coursework they had, whatever it was that shaped their thinking that now drives who they are. This person who wants to go on to graduate school, who's interested in a particular discipline, who gets excited about a particular topic. So who they were and who they are as that candidate, but then also who is it that they want to be? And how is that particular graduate school, that particular discipline or experience, a springboard into that future version of themselves? So by helping them compartmentalize their thinking into those three buckets, it can be a really effective way to get a student to tell a distinct narrative that only they could put forward to a graduate school, but also helps them frame the essay in a way that makes sense and can be compelling to explain why that school should let them in, because it's part of this longer term plan and journey that they have. So making sure that they think about their life and their personal experience in that way can really be an important structure to get them to focus on bringing out the kinds of things that make them a compelling case for graduate school. We find often that students wonder, what is it that schools are looking for? Is it just my GPA? Is it something else? And we encourage you to stress to them that it really is a holistic picture. There's no one particular thing that schools are looking for. It's about the complete puzzle that you can put together. So schools are going to want to see a candidate's aptitude for study. It makes sense. It's an academic program. So that's why they want to see transcripts and letters of recommendation from faculty, and they want to see how well a student writes, all of those different pieces. But at least in our disciplines, they also want to see a clear sense of professional direction. Again, it doesn't have to be about one particular job, but has that candidate thought about that longer term professional trajectory? So again, that's why they want a resume. That's why they might want professional letters of rec. That's why they might want a statement on that professional experience that they've had. All of these pieces come together to get a picture of what that candidate is capable of. But the other component to all of this is how that student can contribute to the success of others. So if you have a student who's had a tremendous experience in their life or overcome something really difficult and has this great story of resilience, all of those can be compelling pieces in their essay because it can elevate the conversation of everyone else around them. It could be based on where they're from, it could be based on their family, it could be based on work or study abroad, or any of those kinds of pieces can be brought in to make a good case that a student belongs in that particular graduate program. So encouraging students to think about the full painting that they're trying to put together can be a good reminder for them that it's not just one of that list of application requirements that I mentioned. It's really how they piece together to let the committee see what that candidate looks like and whether they would be a good fit for the school and the program. As Stephanie mentioned, we hope to make things easy for you and your students to find all of those great programs that would like to connect with them. So before I turn it over to questions, I wanted to share a few of our links and resources with you. We run worldwide events. We run a number of online events, including a series called Best Practices in Applying to Graduate School that's aimed at students and young professionals. All of this can be found on the events page on our website. We have a searchable directory of fellowships and scholarships where students can put different criteria in and filter programs that make sense for them. And as Stephanie said, there's lots of different ways for lots of different students in lots of different majors to get global experience in that way. And we can talk a little bit more about that if that's of interest to you. We also have profiles on all of our graduate schools so they can just see the wide range of opportunities that exist for them and find those kinds of programs that are going to make sure they're set up for success. And then as Stephanie also mentioned, the International Career Guide is there to talk about different sectors, give some tips and insight, and then suggest some employers. For those of you who are active on social media, we have a number of different channels that put out resources and internships and fellowships and stories about students who hopefully reflect the communities that you all serve, and they can see themselves in lots of different roles. We have a monthly newsletter for advisors that drops information on events, scholarships, advice, profiles, different members, lots of different tools and resources to hopefully make your job easier and let you perhaps plug and play some tools into the newsletters or social media content or advice that you're able to give. And then we also run, as I said, a series of different events aimed at both students and advisors. I briefly touched on the student webinars. We have lots of graduate school fairs around the world. We're always in New York, we're always in DC, but we also have events online and in many other cities. This year we were in Tokyo and Toronto, Seoul, Singapore, Atlanta, lots of different spots across the US and around the world. For advisors who may be in Miami or in an easy commute to Miami, we'll be hosting a workshop on May 1st, and more information about that will be released through our advisor newsletter and on our different channels. We also are hoping to host a series of training workshops across the US. This year they were in Syracuse, New York, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and San Diego, California in the US, but we hope we'll be in other cities nationwide throughout 2020. And then as one final very cheap plug before we turn it over to questions, APSIA is still looking for its spring communications and marketing intern. The deadline is tomorrow, and students who are either based here in Washington or would like to work remotely are open and encouraged to apply, and I'm happy to send you more information on that as well. And so with that, I would love to turn it over to all of you, see what sorts of questions you get from students that perhaps Stephanie, or if I can answer, and then hopefully be able to contribute more to your thinking as you help students think about how whatever field they're interested in has a global component and really can build the skills to make them competitive on the global level. So Stephanie, while we're waiting for folks to kick in their questions, I'd like to go back to the different ways that students can get those critical skills that you talked about.
Sure.
In particular, do you have advice for good ways on campus that students can build these skills, particularly if they don't have the ability to intern or perhaps didn't qualify for work study and study abroad might not be possible yet?
Sure. So I mentioned International Education Week, and so that's one opportunity throughout the year that students can get involved with some globally focused events that are on campus. A lot of campuses celebrate that week. It's normally held, I think, the third week in November of every year. But outside of that week's activities, if there is a office of student service learning or an office of international education, they might have opportunities or know of opportunities that they can partner with certain student groups or certain cultural groups that they can get involved with. I know here at Georgia Tech, we have language learning groups. We have a language institute that encourages language exchange and language practice, cultural exchange as well. There are other cultural groups as well that students can participate in. So those are just some of the other opportunities that students can do. There might be intramural sports groups that they can get involved with and learn about a different culture or a different sport that they might not be familiar with. So those are some of the activities students can get involved with on campus. Again, then there's local volunteering opportunities. Sometimes they do that with student groups or sororities or fraternities, but there might be an opportunity to do that individually with a local volunteer organization or even through service learning opportunities built in through the institution. So those are just some ways that they can build some of those experiences.
I would also add the faith communities on campus, as well as another critical skill that can be had if they're able to get opportunities with the fundraising and development office that most colleges and university campuses have these days. Yeah. Those are also good ways. And then two other online opportunities for students who may be interested. One is the UN Volunteer Corps that has short-term projects all online and is a great way for students to build experiences. And then for anyone who's serving US nationals or US citizens, the Virtual Student Foreign Service, the VSFS, opens their application period every July and can be a great way for a student to get some exposure and some really hands-on experience working with federal agencies in the comfort of their dorm room, in their jammies, doing what they need to do. So the VSFS and UNV can be thank you, Stephanie, can be two great ways for students who maybe don't have the ability to get off campus easily to really gain some professional experience.
Right. And so I want to share a few more links or URLs about some websites that may be useful in terms of directing your students to some international focus opportunities. One is called Going Global, and they may be affiliated with your institution's career center already. If not, you can certainly direct your students to this organization where they can find country career guides as well as do internship searches and job searches around the world. And so it's a great site to learn about lots of different global opportunities. So that's Going Global. Um, then also there's a website called ProFellow, which has opportunities about fellowships, both professional and academic fellowships that students and young professionals can apply for around the world. And so if they're seeking to do some sort of fellowship program that might pay for their graduate school, you can probably find some of those opportunities on ProFellow. The last thing I just want to mention, I don't really want to go into a lot of depth about it, but just as a portal for you to know about in terms of maybe doing State Department internships or finding other federal opportunities, the USA Jobs website, but the student portal is there, and that's for students and recent graduates. It talks about some of the Pathways programs and other eligible student opportunities, including the Virtual Student Foreign Service. And so you might want to share some of those links with your students as well.
Stephanie, one area that we work a lot on are students who are typically underrepresented in the field of our space and in global education broadly. Mm-hmm. And we work with Diversity Abroad, which has a lot of student resources. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, being at an institution like Georgia Tech, about a different kind of student that is traditionally underrepresented, and that's majors like STEM and in all of the components that fall under that. We see a lot of demand for those kinds of students who can marry a global perspective with a STEM degree. But I also hear from students that they couldn't possibly because their major doesn't let them or faculty tell them they don't need it. How do you combat some of those typical misconceptions about what's possible for students from those fields?
I think, well, we're a little lucky here at Georgia Tech that we emphasize global perspectives and global experience. But I mean, there's certainly research and data out there that supports particularly having facility with more than one language. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is to be in an immersive experience, hopefully abroad. So we certainly encourage the study abroad. It's always important to also, if you're going to encourage study abroad, to encourage funding for that, because sometimes that's one of the biggest barriers for pursuing an opportunity outside of the United States. But there are lots of different resources to help find some of that funding. But certainly, in addition to pursuing the language, we want our students to think about their careers globally, that there's more than just working working in the United States. And even working in the United States, you're more often than not going to have a very global team to work with. And so it's important to develop those intercultural, interpersonal skills of working with other people and getting diverse perspectives, being aware of diverse perspectives while they're still in college. So we certainly want to emphasize that. And consider ways for students to use their electives academically to pursue minors or certificates in other areas that are a little less traditional for them. Maybe it might be a language, and maybe it might be an international business concentration or something else similar. So here at Georgia Tech, for instance, in the School of International Affairs, we offer a certificate in scenarios, models, and military games. And so it does a lot with geographic information systems and modeling and looking at some warfare and military simulations. And that really does attract a lot of engineers, believe it or not. And so that kind of is a draw for some of the non-traditional majors into international affairs. It gives them a global perspective, a way to look at some of the skills that they're building in a global perspective in a global way. So that's one thing that we certainly use to kind of draw some non-traditional folks into our discipline. But I also know like the international business certificates are always very popular. The language opportunities are always very popular. So those are just some of the avenues that we certainly promote.
We also see a lot of demand for STEM students in the intelligence sector. Mm-hmm. And so for folks who may not be familiar with intelligencecareers.gov, it's an attempt by the IC to pull out some of their stuff and highlight their work distinct from a mega place like USA Jobs. So that can also be a great place to steer engineering, math, GIS students who are trying to think about different career paths beyond some of the things they may hear about from straight engineering faculty.
ISDA is also an organization that promotes international exchange for students in STEM fields. It's a student-run organization. They offer traineeships for students in computer science, engineering, and so that might be a program also to encourage students who are in those STEM fields to think about going abroad.
We also had a question about resources suitable for older returning to work adults. Are there any tips you might be able to share, Stephanie?
Older returning to work adults. So the Pro Fellows site certainly provides fellowship opportunities for professionals as well as for students. And so certainly that might be something to consider. It might be able to pay for graduate education or provide the money for you to do an opportunity abroad through the Pro Fellow database. But also in terms of going back to work with an international focus, I mean, depending on, I would say, thinking about talking with some alumni from a certain program, what insight they might be able to give you about what their trajectory has been after they've graduated. They may be able to give you some sense for what you might want to focus on going into a program. Also, certainly any of the other job portals like USA Jobs or looking at our career guide, that will certainly, all of those resources I think would be valuable for any particular student, no matter what age.
One other tool as well, and it's a bit unconventional, but actually the Peace Corps within the last several years has placed a lot of emphasis on seeing if they can recruit older volunteers to go abroad for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it can be a nice way to take the experience that an older student has had, even if they've been out of the workforce doing something like care for a family member or raising children, so they can build on that experience and apply it in an international context with some support, with some funding, all of those different tools, get 2 years of slightly different perhaps or more concrete professional experience as a nice way to pivot back. Right. We see a lot of tools, particularly for veterans and those who are transitioning out of the military. So in some ways, it also depends on what kept that adult out of a traditional workforce and what they're able to do when they come back.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And that too is also where the local level can be of interest, because there may be tools and resources designed for those communities, but then they can build up into how their city relates on a global level. Stephanie gave the great example earlier, or how you support other communities, maybe refugee communities who are coming into your area. So there's lots of ways, particularly if they've been in a care role, to use that sort of skill base and they're very competitive for those jobs because they have that experience, whether it was paid work or unpaid work.
Right. That's a good point. Also, with local chamber of commerces, also that they might be able to utilize some of their skills with those opportunities. And I know, for instance, we have like a French American Chamber of Commerce here and a German American Chamber of Commerce here, and they have a lot of networking opportunities, and that might be something that they might want to go to or attend to kind of build their networks there as well.
And that's a great point. There's a lot of ways that international actors are present in communities all over the United States, or that the United States is present in communities outside of the US. So in larger cities, there's often a consulate as an offshoot of the official embassy, but there may be affinity groups. There's often groups working, as I said, with refugees, with new immigrants, with international students. If a student has difficulty going abroad themselves, they can still find lots of ways to immerse themselves in different cultures. And then, as Stephanie talked about in terms of marketable skills, that's the kind of thing they can talk about in an interview. Here's how I've worked with an international team to start a soccer league on my campus, or to do a film screening, or even just tangible things like that, that they can use to demonstrate a understanding of multiculturalism, an interest in the world, and then their ability to execute on different projects and practical things. So they don't have to be studying abroad was a tremendous experience for me, but it's not accessible for everyone. And so if not, there's lots of ways to still gain that international experience. But if folks are looking to see how they can make it affordable for students, the Diversity Abroad link that I posted earlier is a great opportunity. The Institute for International Education is running Generation Study Abroad that has a great newsletter where they drop lots of funding from different governments. Their goal is to double the number of US students studying abroad. So they have funding and they have tools and they have ways for you to make the case to your administration about why it's important. Lots of good things to show why this is a critical skill set and experience, and then to help students get there.
Those are great tips.
So we have about 5 minutes left. If folks are not comfortable posing a question or think of something later, on the screen now you see my email. Please feel free to drop me a line. We've had a few questions in the chat about the slides and the recording. After this webinar, I will be able to post the recording on our YouTube page and share the link with you. I will not bombard everybody with the attachment for the slides, but if you'd like them, feel free to respond to that message and I can send them to you. And as I said, feel free to share them with others. Feel free to share the link and recording with others. And we hope that we'll see you and your students at other APSIA events in the future. But last call for questions in case anybody has them. Typing furiously. Thank you. We'll make sure you get them. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your year since it's almost the end. And we wish you a wonderful and successful 2020.
Thanks,
everyone.